You are watching KOCT's North County Roundtable. On today's show, we have pro and con representatives for the SOAR Initiative.
Welcome to KOCT's Roundtable, North County Roundtable. I'm Alison St John. Now, for the next hour, we're going to be talking about the SOAR Initiative, which stands for the Save Open Space and Agricultural Resources. That's going to be Measure Y on your November ballot. I want to just read you the statement, the description of what this is. It says it's an initiative measure amending the land use element of the Oceanside General Plan to require voter approval of proposals to change the land use designation or zoning of agricultural or open space land to any other use. So basically, this is a measure that is aiming to preserve open space and agricultural land in Oceanside, specifically perhaps most importantly, the Morrow Hills area up there when you're driving along 76 on your left. In the northeast corner of Oceanside, you see rolling hills, and this initiative is designed to preserve that. Now, I want to introduce our guests. We have two guests who are in favor of the initiative and two who are against. And I'll start off with Dennis Martinek, who lives in Morrow Hills and is the president of SOAR and the main proponent of this initiative. Thanks so much for joining us, Dennis.
Thank you for allowing us to be here.
And then we have Diane Nygaard, who is the president of Preserve Calavera, which has been working for years to preserve open space of all kinds in North County, the coastal North County areas. Yes. Diane, welcome.
Thank you.
Then we have Neil Nagata, who is the president of the Farm Bureau, and the Farm Bureau has actually taken an official stand against Measure Y.
That is correct.
Thank you for joining us,
Thank you
Neil.
for having us.
And Michelle Keller, who is a vice president with the Milano Company, which is one of the largest flower growers in the United States. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And both Nagata and Milano farms have been growing flowers, fruits, and vegetables in North County for decades. So we'll start off with opening statements, and I'd like to invite you, Dennis, to start off with the 1-minute opening statement.
Measure Y is a voters' rights initiative which gives citizens the right to vote to preserve parks, open space, and agricultural land. Measure Y was modeled after SOAR initiatives in Napa and Ventura counties that have been in effect for over 20 years and have been very successful in fostering sustainable and livable communities. In 2016, voters in Ventura County and 8 cities voted to extend their SOAR initiatives for an additional 30 years because they've worked. Mm-hmm. If you look at a map of Oceanside, the zoning map, you'd see that all neighborhoods benefit from parks, open space, and farmland. And we can preserve those by voting yes for Measure Y.
Thank you. And just before we move on, I'd like to get a few words from you, Diane, as to why you're interested in this. What is your interest in this initiative?
Well, as a granddaughter from a multi-generation farm family, farming, of course, would be important to me, but 2 other critical things. The agricultural land is extremely important to our regional conservation plan, protecting all of our natural resources in the county. Ag land is a key component of that. And the other thing is El Corazon Park in the heart of our city, that is not now protected, that the SOAR initiative would protect.
Thank you. So Neil, your 1-minute opening statement.
So thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share how Measure Y will impact every farming family in Oceanside. I'm a 3rd-generation farmer. My grandfather and father were farming here in Oceanside when they were interned as Japanese Americans in World War II, and they lost everything. Never have I felt that threat in my lifetime, the threat of losing our livelihood in farming by others taking our private property rights. Until this, we are challenged with, we are challenged. We face farming today in the cost of water and labor as responding to foreign competition. However, for Oceanside farmers, there is no greater threat to farming than Measure Y. Let me explain. As farmers, we must rely on the value of our property to be able to finance our operation. If Measure Y passes, the value of oceanside farm properties will decrease, and most farmers will not be able to renew or obtain financing we need, and that's a fact. Current zoning regulations allow farms to be sold off in 2.5-acre estate lots that only the wealthy can afford, and that preserves no agriculture. The proponents say that it protects parks and recreational open space. However, that's just not true, because parks and recreational open space are already protected under Article 13 under the city's code. So Measure Y is really only about farmland. We have been farming for nearly 80 years in Oceanside, and I want to continue this legacy. You can help all farmers in Oceanside by voting no on Measure Y.
Thank you. And Michelle, why is this measure important for you?
Well, I think it's important to my family, Neil's family, and the farmers in that area. We've been farming there for decades, for a long time. I mean, Neil's talking about, you know, back during the war. Farming is in our blood. It's our business. It's our livelihood. And SOAR says it's there to protect agricultural resources, but those agricultural resources are our farmland. So we can talk about parks and open space in one conversation because the residents own that land. That's city land. But the land that we're talking about now that has to go to a vote of the people is our personal land that we run a business on. And the general plan has not been updated for a really long time. People want us to keep farming the way we farmed 40 years ago. But like Neil said, farming has changed. Droughts, labor issues, foreign imports. We've had to change our farming, and we have to continue to change. So we need the flexibility on our private land to be able to change with the times and have flexibility. And the problem with Measure Y is it locks us into the current general plan and has to go to a vote of the people to change what we're doing on our land.
Let's try and tease some of this out then, some of the issues that have already been raised. I'd like to start by trying to help people understand which pieces of land would actually be affected by this, because like you mentioned, Diane, there are other open spaces in the city, but then you've also said that this will really only affect the farmland because, for example, El Corazon and the other open spaces, the golf courses, are already protected perhaps by statute and could not be changed without a vote of the people. So, Dennis, tell us what is the land that is actually affected by this initiative?
Well, anything designated in the general plan or zoning as open space or agricultural. So open space includes a wide variety of land, some of it protected, some of it not. But as one of the study that was done by the City Council, or at least authorized by the City Council, pointed out that this would give an extra layer of protection for all open space land, whether that has protection or not. But the biggest example of land that's not protected right now is El Corazon. And the city has already taken some steps to build on El Corazon against the supposed plan that they had for it.
Okay, I want to just give your side a chance to respond to that question.
So I just called the city attorney this week, and I asked him specifically how this is going to affect the El Corazon area. And he said that parks and recreational open space is protected. It's protected under Article 13 of the City Code, and I believe we have a slide of that, and it specifically says that any changes or even sale of the property has to go to a vote of the people. And that was specifically from the city attorney, and I just had that conversation this week.
Thank you. Now, Diane, I know you've had a lot to do with El Corazon, so why is El Corazon part of this?
Many conversations with the city attorney about this. That article only applies for dedicated parkland that's used as a park. El Corazon is not yet dedicated as a park. So none of the protection that would apply to some of our parkland covers El Corazon. That is why, if people are out there recently, they've seen bulldozers out there at the entrance to our park, because the City Council, by majority vote, amended the specific plan. All it has is a specific plan. A majority vote of our City Council can amend that. That has already happened. 70 condos have been approved at the entrance, and they're currently in negotiations for a hotel on what's supposed to be parkland. So clearly, our City Council can do it by a majority vote of 3 people. They've done it already, and they're in negotiations to do it again.
All right, so we're not reaching a consensus here, but it sounds like you're saying that it would be mainly affecting the farmland up there, 2,508 acres.
That's
is
correct.
That right?
It's
The
about
Morrow Hills.
3,500 total acres, and the real farmland is about 2,400 acres.
And you're saying, sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
No, I was just going to say that's not our understanding of how it applies to El Corazon. We're not experts on El Corazon, so we've asked the city, and they have the 45% that's set aside as open space and the 50% that will be developed. But I guess what becomes more bothersome when you talk to Neil and I is that this initiative sort of packages open space and parks and areas like that,
right,
which we absolutely support, should go to a vote of the people and should be, have protections in the same bucket that you're putting our private farmland, and it should be handled the same.
Okay, and it's just, I think I'll just summarize here that your side says it is actually going to affect some of the other open space in Oceanside, that it's not just about Morrow Hills.
Absolutely.
However, would you agree that in fact Morrow Hills, the agricultural, that rolling hills there on the left, the north side of 76,
is critical component.
is the most important component
It's
perhaps
a
of this
critical,
initiative, which is where you live, Dennis.
Yes.
So let me just ask you, now let's just look about agriculture. I want to ask you, do you really think that agriculture is still sustainable? We're living in an area where water is becoming more and more expensive, the temperatures are going up. Is it a romantic illusion to think that farming can continue in Oceanside, within the city limits?
Well, I agree that agriculture is in transition, but it's been in transition many times in our history over the last couple hundred years. And it's a situation now where you have farmers looking for alternative crops that are viable, that are money-making. And we have the situation where I live across the street from a winery, and my neighbor is producing grapes. Grapes require less water. If you give farmers a chance, whether they're small farmers or big farmers, they're going to look for alternatives. I've done research on my trees, trying to figure out what's productive, what'll work, what takes less water. So if nothing else, what we want to do is put off the proposed development of our agricultural area, and this is less than 15% of what Oceanside once had. And if we can put that out to give farmers a chance to come up with other crops, we can save our agriculture, which is very viable and sustainable.
And briefly.
And if anybody reads the newspaper, there was a great story in the Union Tribune a couple of weeks ago that talked about the vibrancy of the farming economy in San Diego County. We got 250,000 acres in farmland. People are still farming because it's still viable. It's still sustainable. Of course, changes need to be made. There are very real challenges, but there are ways to address those challenges. One of the things is agritourism, which SOAR supports.
So this is one of the things that I was just reading, Neil, that there are 5,000 farmers still in San Diego County as a whole, and that San Diego far surpasses its fellow top producing counties by producing agricultural products that are more valuable than other parts of California, like San Francisco, Orange County, and Los Angeles. So why can't you remain sustainable even if SOAR were to be passed?
So agriculture is challenging, and every day we try new things. And so I've done hydroponic strawberries. I've done a lot of variation of farming, and we've been innovative. That's why we're still here. We've grown throughout the city of Oceanside, and most of those farmlands are now houses. And so, what are we doing wrong? We're staying in businesses longer than anybody else. And that's what we continue to try to do, and we're innovative. And for someone who has not gone into the farming business to say that we're doing something wrong by trying to attempt to do things is really frustrating, because we live it every day. I sit on the California Strawberry Commission. I sit on the San Diego County Farm Bureau. I am working hard. I'm trying to support farmers. This is really what I do. And I went to school over 30 years ago, came back to farm. And anybody that says that we're not trying to innovate, we're not trying to be part of the agricultural living in San Diego County and in Oceanside, has just got it wrong.
I think this is where perhaps the viewers might have a little bit of a trouble understanding that the SOAR initiative is designed to preserve agricultural land, but you're saying that this would not preserve it, this would actually destroy it. Explain a little bit more clearly what you mean.
So, along with the members of the San Diego County Farm Bureau, they oppose this measure. And the reason is because it actually hurts agriculture. And it hurts agriculture directly to me is because I rely on farm loans, and most farmers do. farm crops are very expensive. For an example, strawberries are between $25,000 and $30,000 an acre. If you were to take it and put that in the ground, it costs a tremendous amount of money. Now, there are other crops, there are other things that you can do, but those infrastructures, those sales structures, anything that you've been set up to do, it takes time to build those markets, it takes time to do other things. And so there's competition from Mexico, there's competition from South America. And so we have to be innovative. We still have to take care of our employees. We have lifelong employees that have been working for us for over 60 years. And you know, how do we take care of those individuals that we've been working so hard and next to for a lifetime? They're actually almost members of our family.
So what you're saying is that the value of the land depends on being able to develop it if you choose, and that is what you get your loans that help you stay in business.
That is
that
absolutely the case. Some people say that we can borrow on the crop, but very few lending institutions actually even consider taking a crop value because of the disasters that can happen.
Can I ask you how the value of the land might change if SOAR were to pass?
So historically, and Ventura is a perfect example, the land value has gone down. And it's just that people cannot develop it, so they base it on the potential future of that land. And so if we can change with agricultural changes, if we can put structures, so some indoor greenhouses, indoor growing, especially the cannabis and things like that, we may need to put up structures. And if we have to go to a vote of the people, it would be impossible for us to change our growing needs.
Can I just ask you whether this is accurate? I read somewhere that the land could be worth 1.5 million an acre, but it would go down to 60,000 an acre if SOAR were to pass. I mean,
so
that is a big difference.
There is a huge difference, and I don't know exactly what the development cost or the total is, but yeah, it's very possible. There's land up in Orange County that goes for $3 million fully built out, but there's also land just east of the 15 that sells for $45,000, $50,000, $60,000, and so you can have a great difference of what it is, and our land has value, and so what it would be able to do is go into 2.5 acre lots. That is the legal lot split based on what the current zoning is. And so if it isn't farmland for our family, it very may likely end up into be 2.5 acre lots.
A lot of farmers in the 2008, when land values went down during the recession,
right.
A lot of farmers lost their loans because that's just kind of an example of as land lost its value, the bank went and reassessed, and then they lost their loans because that is their collateral.
Thank you.
But
so,
Dennis. It's not true that SOAR has a negative impact on land values. And it's not true that agricultural land has fallen. If you read an ongoing study, they've been doing it since 1929, and it's the California chapter of the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers, a very well thought of group. They've put out a chart for Region 6, which is Ventura County. And if you look on that chart from 1993, when SOAR, the first SOAR initiatives went in, you'll see that Ventura County actually had a continuous increase in land value, and Ventura County was a greater increase than all other areas in the district because of SOAR. So the idea that SOAR is going to have a negative impact is not true.
Diane?
And I mean, if you look at the value of land, of course there's a big difference in the value of land. There's a big difference in the value of land that has water, sewer, streets, whatever. Of course, that makes a huge difference as compared to agricultural land. That's why the taxes are lower. It's why the land price is lower. No lender will lend money based on the idea that this land, someday a developer might want to develop it into a higher use value. It's based on the current use and value of that land, not speculation. Laws prohibit that kind of speculative land.
You've got to remember that SOAR does not change the existing general plan, where you can build these facilities that Neil's talking about.
Well, actually, I want to ask you about that very thing, because under the existing general plan, you can build a house on 2.5 acres. And in fact, that's what your house is on, right?
And packing houses and other facilities to do your agriculture.
So let me just ask you, if you left it the way it was, which is what would happen under SOAR, and it wasn't going to change, what's to stop the farmers from selling their land and having a lot of big mansions on 2.5 acre lots instead of having denser homes that perhaps more of us could afford?
Probably a lot of the topography for one thing, the idea of the expense of doing it that way. I would expect that what would happen, what would be feasible for the large landowners, is to do it in some small parcels, but in some larger parcels also. And you've got to remember that in San Diego County, with more than 5,000 farmers, over 65% of those are small farmers, which means 1 to 9 acres, with the average, or excuse me, the median being 4 acres. So if we go to small farms, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a farmer being small. A lot of times they can be more creative because they're subsidizing their farms with other income and all.
But I want to ask you, because this to me is one of the more important questions for the average person, is if we pass this thing, will we just see all those green fields turn into mansions on 2.5-acre lots?
Absolutely. When you look at the market makes these decisions. I look at land in Carlsbad that was entitled for those kind of large estate homes 12 years ago. They've extended their entitlements twice. There's no market for it. They can't get loans to build that way. The market determines what's viable in areas.
All right, so
now, one
Dennis,
perfect example
yes.
of some of those homes with those 2.5-acre lots, the water is so expensive that a lot of those are open lots with dead and dying trees. And so when the lilac fire came through, those dead and dying trees are just perfect fodder for the fire. And we had the captain of the county fire department come through and talk to us about how destructive that fire was. And a lot of it was because the environmental people will not allow the cleanup in some of the river banks and things like that. And so not being able to take care of some of these things, where agriculture can help and protect some of these things, that is what we're looking for.
And I think to comment, I mean, like what Dennis said, there is creativity to be able to have a farm on 5 or 6 acres where there's a home, it's subsidized. But I guess for us that are commercial farmers out there who have stuck this out, I mean, when we go back and look at 50 years ago, 100 years ago, agriculture in this region looked very different. It was all agriculture. So for families like ours that stuck it out and we modernized and we changed our crops and we stayed with the times to stay in business and farming, it feels like Measure Y says it's here to protect agricultural resources, which are farms like ours, when really it's just looking to maybe chop up into those smaller farms. And to say you're going to save farming by locking in an ag zone doesn't help farmers stay in business. And so when we look at like ag tourism and wanting to look at, you know, Dennis referred to the grapes across the street and then opening a winery, there's things like this starting to pop up, and agritourism is very popular. And I think the people of Oceanside would love an agritourism region, as would we. There's this indication that farmers like us really just want to put concrete in 1,000 homes. And if that was the case, Neil's family, our family, we would have done that a long time ago. We could have called developers a long time ago. We want to stay farming and we want to stay in business, but that really requires us to be able to get into agritourism or to get into things that maybe require that region to look a little bit different than it has for the last 50 or 100 years.
Okay.
We need to be really clear about what is allowed under our existing zoning for agricultural
So right
land.
now we're talking about whether agritourism could go ahead, right?
Yes.
Okay,
And let's talk about all the options available under the existing zoning. Keep in mind, SOAR does not touch the existing zoning, anything that can be done under the existing zoning. It's only when they want to change that zoning. Under the existing zoning, the farmer has the right to build any farming-related buildings on his property. Simple administrative permit, easier than us doing modifications on our house. They want to do agritourism. SOAR specifically says agritourism is allowed because that is a way for it to remain viable.
And I think a lot of people in Oceanside have been watching the efforts to get agritourism going in Morrow Hills.
So at the time we wrote the ordinance, it was specifically written in, it is allowed.
Can I ask you what progress has been made on the efforts to promote agritourism in Morrow Hills so far?
Well,
Dennis?
I've spoken to the Planning Commission last week in support of agritourism that's moving forward. The Agritourism Committee in Oceanside has done a very good job, and they've had good guidance by staff. And so they are moving forward, expanding some of the activities that are compatible with agriculture. And I think these activities are going to help farmers an awful lot.
So for the average Oceanside resident who maybe is never going to go stay in a boutique hotel in an agritourism area in Morrow Hills, what would you say they have to look forward to? Why would they want to preserve agriculture in Morrow Hills?
But I think to talk, as we're talking about agritourism, there's the agritourism that is allowed under the current zoning, which SOAR does protect. There's currently some changes and some additions happening, which really, we the farmers kind of went and asked them prior to this going on the ballot, let's expand it as much as we can. Tier 1 agritourism, which is allowed currently, that's how Oceanside has some definitions. Tier 1 is simplistic, to use the best term. We could put a roadside stand and Neil could sell some fruit on his property, or we could have a roadside stand and sell some flowers. But the problem is we're talking about an ag zone that is so set back that nobody knows where we are. The roads are small, so you're not driving down the road to go buy this little farm stand to buy flowers. That doesn't help keep a farmer in business.
So how would you like to see agritourism
We would like
develop?
to see a region out there to have agritourism be what I think the average person think of when they think of agritourism. And those are destination spots. Those are where the public is going to come and really participate in agriculture.
You mean
and really
like large restaurants, farm-to-table restaurants?
Farm-to-table restaurants,
farm-to-table
something like that.
restaurants, wineries.
Absolutely, wineries,
but that
breweries.
requires, I mean, we would need the people to come out, and the way South Morro Hills is currently set up with the infrastructure, the roads can't really accommodate that. There's no sewer. There's, you know, it would require some changes out there. That area has been so rural and so farming forever that, you know, the master plan is sort of antiquated in that it still pictures that area as a set-off farming area. We sort of need to bring the people there to participate, and we want the people to come. We want to keep farming, and we want the people to come and participate.
It sounds to me like you're both in some ways making the same plea, that you both want agritourism, but your agritourism might involve a little bit more development and larger roads, and yours would be more rural.
No,
so
SOAR does not impact agritourism.
How does the SOAR initiative?
Agritourism is
Let me just
allowed
ask you this
under
question:
SOAR.
how does SOAR affect agritourism?
It specifically allows it. It doesn't restrict, it doesn't define it, because that will come from local ordinances. The local ordinance changed what's covered under agricultural zoning. It is not impacted by SOAR. Whatever is allowed under agricultural zoning will be allowed with SOAR. It does not change that. It very specifically allows it. But we lost the 2.5 acre discussion. And this is really critical for people understanding. We were talking before about what can...
1 minute until the break to help us understand that.
Okay. Nobody is forced to do anything with their land. The market will determine what's viable in terms of parcels and how that land is used. SOAR does not force anyone to do anything. The current agricultural zoning gives the farmer or landowner the options: continue farming, do agritourism, do lot splits if they choose to do that. They have full rights to make those changes today as they choose to.
And
the only time
we're not contradicting that.
That's not what your campaign materials say.
Well, no, so what we're saying is there's two options on that land, which is farming or 2.5 acres. So if you can't farm or participate in Tier 1 agritourism, which is beekeeping and a roadside stand, if we go out of business because of business
or Measure Y,
then our only option. So we don't feel we're being forced. The point is, when we go out of business or are pushed out of business because of outside pressures and land values, et cetera, Measure Y locks us into only one option.
Okay, we have to stop there. We're going to have a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to continue this.
And any options.
And when we come back, we're actually going to experiment with asking each side to ask a question of the other side, because we're very interested to know what is the burning question you have for your opponents. We have Neil Nagata, Michelle Keller, right, of Milano Farms, and we have Dennis Martinek and Diane Nygaard of Preserve Calavera. We'll be right back.
This is Zoe. She's 1, and she's running for president, potentially in 2064. Because if she's kept safe and eats well, has the opportunity to learn and grow, if she has help getting ahead and support along the way, then Zoe could be president. Like her hero, Ababam Binken. Help kids like Zoe dream big. The why, for early learning, childcare, mentorship, and more. For a better us. Donate to the Y at zoeforpresident.net.
Welcome back to KOCT's North County Roundtable. I'm Alison St John, and we continue our discussion here about the SOAR Initiative that will be on your November ballot as Measure Y. SOAR stands for Save Open Space and Agricultural Resources. Our guests are Dennis Martinek, Diane Nygaard, Neil Nagata, and Michelle Castellano Keller. Thank you so much for being here. So I want you now to start thinking about what you would like to ask your opponent. Neil, we're going to start with you. Do you have a burning question for the proponents of the SOAR Initiative?
I believe that Michelle's going to ask.
Michelle is going to ask it?
Yeah, actually, my question is about a major effort that Dennis took part in about 19 years ago to the city, then trying to limit farming. And the goal of that effort was to severely limit commercial farming, like Neil and I, in favor of the estate homes and smaller lots by requiring conditional use permits in the city of Oceanside for all new agricultural enterprises in our agricultural zone. Conditional use permit is a tool normally used to oversee the use of urban property that is outside the established zoning. In this case, it said if we modernized or changed what we grew, how we grew it, we would have to get a permit to do so. This effort sought to reduce our productive farmland by creating 1,000-foot buffers for most of our normal farming activities from estate homes next to us. It sought to limit the hours of operations in our trucks and basically would have forced us out of business. So, Dennis, during that time as a leader, you had clearly stated that commercial farms like us were becoming nuisances to residents in the estate homes up on the hill. So now Measure Y would accomplish the same thing by a different means. So my question is specifically for Dennis. Measure Y claims to support farming, but based on your efforts 2 decades ago up to today with this measure, it really feels like you don't. And I guess we'd like to know why you continue attempting measures that would destroy commercial farming like ours in order to preserve an antiquated general plan and estate homes.
Well, I did not do that 2 decades ago. I was a member of our homeowners association that was active, but I was not an officer at that time. I may have been a board member, but at that time we had problems with heavy trucks. And the issue was just trying to quiet the trucks in the area. And the conditional use permit only pertained to those establishments that used big semis. So as a member of the association, I did support that effort. But there was no way did I take any measures against agriculture in the area, which I definitely want to preserve now.
So I just want
at that time.
To maybe translate a little bit what I heard in the question, which was that it sounds like you would prefer perhaps the small farmers rather than the larger farmers that are in the area.
Well, not at all. Matter of fact, I appreciate the work that both families do. I think they're excellent farmers, and what they do is beautiful and definitely productive. So I want to see them prosper, but I don't want to see them turning their land into high-density development by selling to developers.
Does that satisfy you, Michelle?
Well, I mean, we can go back to what happened with the Agriculture Ad Hoc Committee that went to the Planning Commission in 2000.
And let's not get too much into the
exactly.
weeds here.
But I guess what the problem is we're not talking about development, but one of the things that's happening with agriculture, and this goes to the farming in San Diego, you know, a lot of agriculture looks different. We're not row crops like we used to be because of the expense and because of the competition. So you're seeing more nurseries, which requires a lot more trucks and requires a lot more pots and requires a lot more crop changes. And so that changes that area out there. That does put a lot more trucks. So I guess in one side, people are saying we need to modernize, the farmers need to modernize and find ways to stay in business, which the Nagata family, the Milano family, many farmers have done a great job of doing. But there needs to be some understanding that in doing that, you know, farming is industrial and dirty, and it takes a lot to put that seed in the ground and plant that crop. And there tends to be this issue of we like the farmers so long as they're farming the way we want them to farm.
I think you're making a very interesting point about agriculture and different concepts of agriculture.
It's very interesting how that problem was resolved, and that problem was resolved by asking one particular grower at that time to instruct his men not to downshift their trucks as they're going up and down the hills. And I remember both your families in supporting that and trying to place some regulation on the one particular grower that was causing problems.
I would like to move on. I feel like you've highlighted an interesting question about what is agriculture, but I would like to give you guys now an opportunity to ask the opponents a question.
Sure. For both Michelle and Neil, if this is about farming, why are your major funders North River Farms, an out-of-town developer of high-density projects, and the building industry? You've received a lot of funds from both of them.
That is correct. We have received a lot of funds from both of them.
So,
you know, Neil and I started our Keep Farming in Oceanside committee back when you were in the signature gathering phase of this, so we could get our side out, get the farmers' side out, because SOAR indicated that the farmers were in support of SOAR, and so we got together with the farmers and created a group to get that word out. Now that SOAR is on the ballot, we have to get our message out, and our committee is still in place, and we have accepted donations from all kinds of people, including the individuals that you have suggested have donated a lot of money to us. We're very proud of our committee, we're very proud of our family, and we're very proud to get that word out.
Can I ask you a question from the average Oceanside resident who's going to vote on this? How would you respond to somebody who feels like you are, you know, in league with the developers on this initiative?
Nothing to do with a development project, and in fact, there's no commitment to the development project. We are trying to save our farms. We're trying to stay in business, and so when you're coming after us and saying we're going to try to destroy you, because that's the way it feels. It's a direct attack on us staying in business. We need every angle and everything that we can do to sustain ourselves. We are being hurtled upon, just rule after rule, additional burdens, and this is just one more thing that's going to cubbyhole us instead of allowing flexibility, instead of allowing ag tourism where we can flourish, instead of growing agriculture in our region. They're cubbyholing us, and the eventual outcome may be the 2.5-acre lots.
Why would you be using developer money if in fact you weren't planning on working with developers in the future?
Well, it's an interesting thing that's happening here, because the reference to integral, you know, the SOAR group has said many times that this issue came up because of one project on 150 acres. And I guess what's frustrating to us is, then why didn't this effort become a referendum or some sort of issue against that one project? Instead, it blankets 3,500 acres of agricultural land, and so it feels like an attack on all of us when we're not that one project. So we and that project both oppose SOAR for our own reasons. And so, yes, we have accepted money from all sorts of people, including that group. I understand that there could be a feeling of we're in bed with them and therefore we want them to develop our land. But look, if we wanted to develop our land, we would have gone to a developer years ago. Our family is struggling to stay in business. And I think this issue is a perfect example of why Measure Y is such a bad measure, because if in the future we want to do any sort of changes or robust agritourism or whatever, we have to go to a vote of the people, and we can't afford. We were shocked at what a measure like this costs, and so we had to accept money from people to get our word out.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. So I want to move on from this idea of preserving agriculture to the issue of housing, which is the other side of the coin, because Oceanside residents are aware that it is very difficult to find affordable housing in this city or anywhere in the county. So the price of housing is becoming a big issue for many families. And there have been some suggestions that if we pass SOAR, there will be fewer houses built, there'll be less land in Oceanside to build, and that will put the price of housing up. So I mean, I wanted to ask you, Dennis, really, you know, does Oceanside have a good plan to build enough housing if we say no, you cannot build on Morrow Hills?
As part of our regional planning agency, Sandag tells every city how many homes they need to build. Very low income, moderate income, above moderate income. Every city has that number, their RENA number. Oceanside has that number. They're obligated to do a plan that has to be approved by the state. We need 6,270 housing units between now and 2021. That's the number our plan requires. Guess where we can build 100% of those units?
That's the
on
question.
Land that is zoned for housing.
So now what land, where in
that is
Oceanside
zoned for
is that
housing,
going to happen?
scattered all over town, vacant and underutilized lots, land that's zoned for housing.
Now, what,
and
let me ask you this. I just want to ask you, because there have been studies, and Oceanside is not the only city that is way behind on meeting its housing needs. Everybody in the whole county, but Oceanside, like everyone else, is behind because the houses are not being built on those infill lots.
Well,
they're not being built there. So how can you make sure that that would happen?
We identify smart growth sites in our city plan. Our general plan is really a contract. What SOAR does is really defend that general plan. It says, here's what our plan is, here's where we have housing, here's where we commercial, here's where we have farmland. So you know if you build a house, you're not going to have a brewery next door to you with rowdy people, and if you build a brewery here in the commercial district, you're not going to have a senior facility next door that's going to say you got to shut down at 10. That's part of the plan that we all rely on. So that's critical. That plan and smart growth in the region says what is the worst thing for affordability of housing? Sprawl development. Sprawl development. Our housing plan specifically says to accommodate low income and moderate income housing, it needs to be where there are services, where there are jobs, and where there's public transit. Not out in the hinterlands for those families that don't have 2 cars who can afford those homes. Those homes are not affordable. They're not going to be low-income affordable homes.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to give the other side a chance. So Dennis and Michelle, I mean, this is a difficult one for you because, sorry, Neil and Michelle, you basically can't be arguing, yes, we need more housing, because then it sounds like you're just going to sell your land to the developers and build. But the fact is that Oceanside does need more housing. So do you have as part of your argument in your campaign that housing prices might go up in Oceanside if SOAR passes?
So that's not part of our campaign, but we do have some interesting concepts, and we've been talking about an ag vision. An ag vision would allow some changes up in that area to cluster homes and things like that, which Measure Y would not allow. And so we want the flexibility to bring in this ag vision, and if that is acceptable, then we can have clustered homes, but we can have set-aside agriculture. And if we can do something like that, then we have flexibility. The one thing about cities and everything and businesses, you need flexibility. You need to be able to manage things. And taking everything to a vote of the people reduces the ability of flexibility. The city of Oceanside has gone through massive changes over the years. In the 80s, there was just a non-building time, and it went through just a terrible economic downturn. And it's just a challenge that if we don't have that flexibility, whenever we lock something in rigid, then we can't be adaptive. We can't introduce new technology like Uber. So you don't have a car. You can use an Uber and get some, and that's a new modern technology. Why can't we just be more flexible?
So I think it's interesting that in this debate here, we don't have another interest group in this debate over agricultural and preserving open space, which is the Chamber of Commerce, which produced a report saying that, house prices might go up. And that if you did develop it, there would be a lot more gross regional product. Oceanside as a city would be a more economically viable city if, in fact, you were allowed to develop.
Well, what does it do to our job housing ratio, though? I mean, you've got to look at what prompted the SOAR Initiative. Why did hundreds of people spend their volunteer time going out to get signatures? 13,522. What prompted us to do that? We wanted to protect those lands. 80% of the farmers who live there said they don't want to see development. They don't want to see the area change. They want to preserve agriculture. We did it to protect those lands. Why? Because of one project, North River Farms, moved forward. The staff uniformly said it's not good. The Planning Commission uniformly rejected it. Went to a city council workshop. They said, let's give them a chance. So they gave them the green light to proceed. One project moves forward doing that, more will follow.
So you have a situation where the city council, it only takes 3 votes,
right,
and the 3 votes that they put in, it could make no sense at all. They went against their professional staff, they went against their planning commission, they went against almost a unanimous audience when it was heard. So what SOAR does is give voters the right to determine that, not 3 individuals on the city council who, face it, they are influenced by the development industry. There have been several developers that spend more time with them than they do with the neighbors or do with the planning commission. So SOAR is a way of making it so that voters have a say in what's going to happen to their community. And if you allow housing development in areas where there is no infrastructure, you're going to have increased congestion, you're going to have increased taxes for the infrastructure, and you're just going to have a community that no one wants to live in.
Now, I just want to make the point from the Chamber report that if a third of the land was developed, not 2.5 acre lots, but the kind of houses that perhaps you might say Oceanside needs, more family homes, that the cost of those homes would be about $650,000. So this would not solve the affordable housing situation at all. It would just be more expensive homes. But I mean, I wonder whether, in fact, if it were to pass, why wouldn't a developer who had a really good argument be able to say, if there's a lack of affordable homes in Oceanside, we want to put this to an initiative and get the voters to vote on it, which is what the SOAR initiative is saying. It's that if the voters will approve it, you could sell some of your land and have a development.
What's interesting in this conversation, and I referenced it earlier, that the North River Farms did trigger this. There's a few things happening right now. I mean, we're kind of talking about a few things happening all at the same time. So the farmers with some of the neighbors have been working on this Oceanside agrivision for several years to bring agritourism out there as a way of preserving land, where Measure Y doesn't preserve any land for agriculture. It just locks in the zoning of agriculture or 2.5 acres. This idea of maybe there's a way to set aside land as agriculture, take away these big lots and cluster over and come up with a new idea that could accommodate all of this. A utility district that they would pay into that would deal with that infrastructure. The thing is the farmers are trying to figure out ways to stay in business. People want agriculture in business, but so there's all these things. The other thing is when you look at the North River Farms project, however you feel about that, that came about because a landowner of farmland could not find farming tenants anymore. Farming is more and more difficult, and so they had to do something with their land. Now, whether you think that project was the right project or the wrong project, the point is change needs to happen out there. And I guess our problem is Measure Y doesn't think outside of the box or look for ways to resolve a lot of the issues. It sort of locks it in, and any changes goes to a vote of the people. And so like what we were saying earlier, that's expensive and complicated. And for farmers, we don't know how to do that sort of thing. So every time we want to attempt one of these changes, it is going to almost force outside entities to come in and really force that change versus us all working together to figure out a way to preserve the ag land and bring the infrastructure over that South Memorial Hills might look a little different than it has under the current general plan, but it has such an opportunity to be this vibrant agritourism, agricultural community.
So Diane, can you talk a little bit more about this issue of an initiative? Because it's very difficult to get initiatives passed. In fact, I don't remember the last time it's happened that will say, yes, we do want more development. Do you ever foresee a time when there might come where the Oceanside residents might say yes?
But in Ventura County, they had 11 issues go before in the last 5 years, and 6 of them passed. It was put to the voters.
That's right.
Voters are very reasonable, and I don't know why they're put down by city councils or government officials or anybody else. Voters will evaluate things, and they use common sense. And if the project makes sense, it depends on the number of houses you're talking about as far as clustering goes. But you're talking a long-term project, at least 2 years to get that through. And putting it on for a vote of the people is no big deal. It really isn't. And the system would work. SOAR provides for that.
I beg to differ with that. It's so expensive for us to even go against this measure. We've got all our money tied up in our crops. So we've already got our money invested in the ground. So we're borrowing, or not borrowing, we're talking to other people, asking them for help because we are doing our job. We're farming. And other people are assisting us. And we need to do everything that we can to try to fight this measure. And it isn't just something that is an easy thing to overcome.
Is there a feeling in your, when you analyze your financial challenges that you're facing keeping agriculture going here in San Diego County. And if this thing passes, the SOAR Initiative passes, do you have a sense in your mind of how long you could survive as a farmer?
I have no idea. Every day I'm challenged by the bills that I have to pay. And so we are constantly at a struggle. We have to reanalyze every time that it comes up. We have to go back to the banks and they have to check, you know, our collateral to make sure that we're in line with everything that we're doing.
SOAR won't add $1 to those bills.
No.
All SOAR does is preserve our present general
No, but
plan.
it prevents us from being able to be creative. And like Neil is saying, if we want to get into agritourism, it does, because if we want to get into some robust agritourism or things like that, we have to go to a vote of the people. And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars out of our pocket. And our passion is our farm workers and taking care of all of these people. We'd rather put that money in their pocket versus an initiative that has to go to a citywide vote. And that's one citywide vote if I want to do a project. 5 years later, if Neil wants to do a project, that's another citywide vote. And it becomes more and more complicated and expensive.
Just have a couple of minutes before we go into our final closing statements. So I just want to ask you how the campaign is going. I mean, you have perhaps more money to run a campaign. How are you reaching out to the voters? Bearing in mind that 13,000 people signed the initiative to get it on the ballot in the first place.
So we're working as hard as we can. Michelle and I are visiting whatever group will have us, and we're talking, and we are having flyers, and we are having some signs put out. And it really is for people to understand that we've been in farming for a long time. We're trying to stay in business. Everything we're trying to do is get out the word. And I do have a full-time job. I'm not retired like Dennis. I can't go to my law firm and you know, get money out of that. I actually have to farm for a livelihood, and I'm taking a lot of time to try to get the word out. This is a very difficult hurdle. It's something that, you know, I'm passionate about because I want to remain in farming. I've been passionate about saving farms and farming for my whole life. I've dedicated my whole life to this.
So for the average voter who is a little confused, because both sides are arguing to save farming, to save agriculture, and yet, you know, if you're a voter, are they going to be seeing flyers coming to their door with the arguments that you would like to make?
Yeah, so we do have flyers going around the city, and so, you know, just if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm open to talking to them. And if we can, you know, come to their venues, we'd be more than happy to.
And I think regardless, the nice thing about this measure is people do love farming, and they love farmers.
Absolutely. And that's why the majority of farmers are with SOAR.
And
yes, on SOAR,
that's
the
not true.
majority of farmers.
And just before we get into closing statements, what is your campaign strategy? Are you going door to door, or?
Primarily door to door, grassroots. We do have a little card that we give people stating the arguments and where they can get additional information. So it's going to be a lot of face-to-face contact.
Okay, thank you. So let's now do closing statements, and each side will have 2 minutes. Michelle, I'd like to invite you to give the
thank you again for
opposing.
this time. Absolutely, thank you for our time. And I think what you're hearing here is two different views of Measure Y. We have two different opinions here, a view from the farmers and a view from someone who lives on a 2.5-acre estate within the farming community. And we understand the struggle that is going on here. You know, South Morro Hills is a working agricultural community. It is not Rancho Santa Fe. And for individuals like Dennis and the other estate homeowners who live next to farms, it's difficult. Farming is industrial. It's dirty. It takes a lot for us to put that seed in the ground and get a crop. We have trucks, we have tractors, we have noise. And it's difficult for us to be out in South Morro Hills and have to farm next to some of these estate homes that came in and built next door to us and then have opinions about how and what we should be farming. Like we said earlier, 2 decades ago, many of these same people tried to have control measures in place on what we grow, how we grow it, the equipment we are allowed to use. And if that was successful, we would not be here today. And now it's this measure. And like we said, it came about being scared and angry about one project. And instead of focusing the efforts on that one project and really unifying against that, the attack comes on all of farmland and decreasing our land value and putting us at risk. And eventually, if we go out of business, the only option we have is the 2.5 acres. We feel like this is a form of eminent domain directed at working farmers like Neil and I. Measure Y does nothing to protect the parks and public recreation in Oceanside, since they're already protected under the Article 13 of the Oceanside Municipal Code, which we talked about earlier. And again, they claim that a measure will promote agritourism, and let's be clear, from farmers, this is not the case. small fruit stands on the side of the road and low-level agritourism is not going to keep farmers in business in South Morrow Hills. So again, what you have is 2 opinions on Measure Y. I'm asking people to support us, the commercial farmers who have endured farming all these years despite the difficulties that farmers face. Over these years, we've not sold to builders, and we want to stay and farm, but we need the flexibility to do so in order to bring real agritourism and other opportunities and not have Measure Y lock in an antiquated general plan. You can visit our website at Keep Farming in Oceanside, and I'm confident that everyone will join us and vote no on Measure Y, and we appreciate this time.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Diane.
And absolutely, for those of us who are really concerned about farming and the farmers of Oceanside, yes, one project building 689 homes will start the dominoes falling. So that's all SOAR does, is protect us from that happening by adding one step to an approval process only in the limited case where they want to change the farming. We talk to thousands of people in every neighborhood in this community. They don't want to see dense development everywhere. They want to preserve parks and open space and farmland, so there's some breathing room, so we don't become LA. They're tired of the traffic congestion that comes from poorly planned development, and they think they should have a say before we lose these priceless lands. And they definitely think they should have a say if it's going to cost them money. We didn't even get into this issue. That kind of sprawled development in the area where it wasn't planned, we end up paying the infrastructure cost. We pay for the expanded water, we pay for the city sewer, we pay for the 2-lane dirt roads, we pay for increased public safety. We, all the taxpayers of Oceanside, pay the cost of that sprawled development. So that's why people think they should have a say. If we're going to change the general plan that's a contract, then we should have a say. Of course, we can update our general plan should be updated. We can address all of these issues at that time, but we do it in an organized, planned way. That is our contract with everyone. Yes on Y gives the people of Oceanside a voice, the right to vote on projects that irreversibly could change our community, like this 689 homes, which is the tip of the iceberg. Yes on Y supports the farmers who want to continue farming. Yes on Y makes sure our tax dollars are spent wisely, not for more sprawled development where we all get stuck with the bills for that infrastructure and the developer takes their profits and leaves town. Measure Y puts our community first. That's why we are all supporting Yes on Y. We urge the people of Oceanside to join us. Yes on Y, yes for Oceanside.
Thank you very much, Diane Nygaard. I'd like to thank all 4 of you, Diane Nygaard, Dennis Martinek, both of you are for Yes on Y, which is the SOAR Initiative, and Neil Nagata and Michelle Castellano Keller, who are opposed to Y. That's been a very interesting discussion. We really hope that you will take the time to think about these issues very carefully because they will affect the future of that rural corner of Oceanside and the development all over Oceanside. This is a big decision for our citizens and we urge you to vote. I'm Alison St John. Thank you so much for watching KOCT's North County Roundtable.